She knelt on the cold diner floor, trembling, soup dripping from her apron as cruel laughter filled the air. "Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt," she whispered, her voice breaking in front of strangers who didn't care. But one man did, a quiet customer in a suit who stood up when no one else would. What happened next would turn her shattered world upside down, and no one, not even Mara, could have guessed who he really was. Mara had learned to live quietly, like the hum of the refrigerator in the back of the diner. Always there, but never noticed. Every morning before sunrise, she tied her faded black apron around her waist, brushed back her dull brown hair, and whispered a small prayer under her breath. "Please let today be a little easier." But it rarely was. At 34, she felt older than her years, worn thin by the steady weight of bills, exhaustion, and a loneliness she never quite admitted aloud. The diner, with its buzzing neon sign and cracked leather booths, had become both her stage and her cage. She'd been working at Benny's Grill for almost 2 years now, ever since her husband left one rainy night with a packed duffel bag and the words, "You deserve better, Mara," though she suspected he meant himself. Since then, it had been just her and her little girl, Lucy, trying to stay afloat in a world that didn't slow down for anyone. Mara worked double shifts most days, slipping home after midnight to kiss her sleeping daughter's forehead before collapsing into bed, praying her body would find enough strength to rise again in a few hours. The regulars at Benny's knew her by name, but not by story. They saw a tired waitress with kind eyes and a soft voice, always polite, never complaining. She remembered their orders, smiled through their rudeness, and wiped down tables with the quiet precision of someone who didn't want to take up space. Her boss, Benny, was a man who'd long forgotten kindness. He barked orders, cut corners, and never missed a chance to remind Mara that there were a dozen girls who'd take her job for less pay. She nodded, swallowed her pride, and kept working. Because she had to. That Tuesday morning began like any other. The sky outside was still gray, the streets slick from last night's rain. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air as Mara poured cups for a group of construction workers at the counter. Her hands moved on instinct, refill, smile, clear plates, her mind already drifting to the rent due at the end of the week. The door chimed, and she looked up to see a man in a suit walk in. He didn't fit the usual crowd of truckers, locals, and families. His clothes were too sharp, his watch too clean. But what caught her attention wasn't his appearance. It was the way he looked around, quietly observing, as if the diner itself was under a magnifying glass. Mara approached with her usual polite smile, holding the menu against her chest. "Good morning," she said softly. "Coffee?" He nodded, not looking up right away, then gave a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, thank you." His voice was calm, deep, almost out of place here. She poured his cup, left him to read the menu, and went back to wiping the counter. A few minutes later, Benny came storming out of the kitchen, waving a hand at her. "Mara, you forgot to take the garbage out again last night," he snapped loud enough for the diners to hear. She froze, her cheeks burning. I thought Tom said he'd do it after his shift," she tried to explain, but Benny was already shaking his head. "Excuses," he said sharply. "You always got one. Get your act together before I find someone who will." She nodded quickly, blinking back tears, pretending not to notice the few heads turning toward her. The man in the suit looked up then, his brow furrowing as he watched Benny stomp back into the kitchen. Mara steadied her breathing and forced a smile toward the customers. She'd learned long ago that crying on the clock only made things worse. But fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with her that day. Around noon, the lunch rush hit hard, orders piling up, trays clattering, people complaining about wait times. Mara was moving faster than she could think, balancing plates, taking payments, and apologizing for delays. Her body ached, but she kept smiling, until a man at table 7 snapped his fingers. "Hey, sweetheart, this soup's cold," he barked, slamming the bowl down so the liquid splashed across her apron. She jumped back, murmuring an apology, but he wasn't done. "You can't even serve food, right? What are you good for?" he sneered, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Something broke inside her then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, tired crack. She bent down to clean the mess, her hands trembling as the laughter of a few customers echoed around her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Please don't kick me. I'm already hurt." The diner went silent for a moment. Even Benny, standing behind the counter, hesitated before turning away. But the man in the suit didn't. He stood slow and steady, walked toward her, and quietly took the rag from her shaking hands. "It's okay," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "You don't have to do this alone." Mara looked up at him through tears, confused and ashamed. She didn't know yet that this man wasn't just another customer, that he was about to change everything. Mara didn't know what to do. No one had ever knelt beside her like that, not in this place, not with so many eyes watching. The man's hand was steady as he wiped the spilled soup from the floor, ignoring the whispers rippling through the diner. The man at table 7 shifted awkwardly, his smugness faltering when he realized people were staring not at Mara's clumsiness, but at his cruelty. He muttered something about bad service and tossed a few crumpled bills on the table before storming out. Mara wanted to thank the stranger, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she took the rag back gently, her face flushed with shame. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," he said, looking at her with quiet eyes. "But someone should have." Then he returned to his seat as if nothing had happened, leaving Mara standing there, her hands trembling, her heart beating too fast. Benny emerged again from the kitchen, red-faced and scowling. But the moment he noticed the stranger watching him, he paused. The man gave Benny a look that was calm but sharp, a kind of silent authority that made even Benny's voice falter when he grumbled something about getting back to work. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Mara moved like a ghost, her mind looping over that moment. How strange it had been for someone to see her, really see her, not as a server, not as an invisible worker, but as a person. When the rush slowed and the diner emptied out, she finally allowed herself a breath. She poured herself a small cup of coffee, leaning against the counter, staring at the rain streaking the window. The man was still there, finishing his meal slowly. He had been writing something in a small notebook between bites. When he stood to leave, he placed a folded napkin under his empty cup and gave Mara a nod before stepping out into the gray afternoon. She exhaled, a mix of relief and confusion flooding her chest. Customers came and went every day, but something about him lingered. Like a song she couldn't stop humming even after it ended. She waited until the bell above the door stopped ringing, then reached for the napkin. Her name was written at the top in neat handwriting. Beneath it, a short message. "You deserve better than this. Don't lose faith in yourself." At the bottom, a name, Daniel Cross. Mara stared at it, her thumb tracing the ink as if it might disappear. She didn't know that name, but something about it felt heavy, important. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket like a secret, unaware that it would soon change her life. That night, after putting Lucy to bed, Mara sat by the small kitchen window of their apartment. The heater rattled like it always did, and the only light came from the flickering lamp she'd found at a yard sale. She unfolded the napkin again, reading the words until they blurred. It had been so long since anyone told her she deserved better. Those words didn't fit in her world anymore. Her world was scraped knees, overdue bills, and cold coffee at 2 a.m. Yet somehow, that note made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to hope for. The next morning, the diner was buzzing with news. Benny strutted around like a man walking on a tightrope trying not to fall. "Company audit or something," he mumbled to the cook. "Some executive from the head office coming down today." Benny's Grill wasn't exactly a chain, but it was owned by a larger company that managed several diners in the region. The name meant nothing to most employees. It was just another faceless corporation. But when the black car pulled up outside and the door opened, Mara's breath caught. Daniel Cross stepped out, not in the same suit, but the same steady, calm manner. Only now, Benny nearly tripped over himself trying to shake his hand. "Mr. Cross, we weren't expecting," Daniel raised a hand. "Just here to observe," he said smoothly, his tone gentle but firm. He glanced around the diner, his eyes resting briefly on Mara, and then he smiled, just enough for her to know he remembered. All day, Daniel watched. He didn't interfere, didn't announce who he was beyond corporate, but he saw everything: the grease-stained counters, the broken coffee machine, the overworked staff. He saw Benny yelling at Mara for things beyond her control, saw the exhaustion in her movements, the quiet way she accepted every scolding without protest. By the end of the shift, he called everyone to the front. His voice was calm but carried weight. I've seen enough, he said. This place has potential, but it's being run wrong. Benny's smile faltered. And I've also seen someone here who deserves recognition. His gaze turned to Mara, who froze, her heart pounding. You, he said softly. What's your name again? Mara, she whispered, barely audible. Daniel nodded. Mara. You're the reason this place still has heart. Benny looked from Daniel to Mara, his face tightening, but he said nothing. The staff stood silent, unsure what was happening, while Mara's mind swirled in disbelief. She didn't understand what he meant or why her hands were shaking again. Tomorrow, Daniel said finally, turning toward Benny, we're going to make some changes. And when he left that night, Mara stood by the counter long after closing, holding that napkin in her pocket like it was made of gold. The next morning felt different, though Mara couldn't explain why. The air inside the diner seemed heavier, the hum of the coffee machines louder, the smell of bacon sharper. Everyone was on edge, whispering about the man from corporate. Benny had come in early wearing a pressed shirt and forced grin, barking orders to make the place look better than it ever had. He told the cooks to clean the griddle twice and the servers to smile like they were on television. Mara just did as she always did, kept her head down and worked. But when Daniel Cross walked in again, everything slowed. He didn't come with a clipboard or a crowd of executives, just a single briefcase and a quiet presence that filled the room. He greeted each staff member by name, somehow remembering them all from the day before. When he reached Mara, he gave a small nod that made her pulse quicken. Morning, he said softly like a secret. Benny hovered nearby, eager to impress. Mr. Cross, if you'd like to see the new changes, I can... Daniel cut him off with a polite but firm gesture. I'm not here to see changes, Benny. I'm here to understand what's broken. His words were calm, but they made Benny's smile falter. For the next few hours, Daniel stayed mostly in the background, watching the rhythm of the diner, the constant orders, the clatter of dishes, the sighs of workers trying to keep pace. He watched Mara move from table to table, balancing 5 tasks at once, apologizing when something went wrong that wasn't her fault. He saw her kindness in small things, the way she refilled an old man's coffee without being asked, how she slipped a cookie onto a little boy's plate when his mother said they couldn't afford dessert. Then came the breaking point. Benny, red-faced and sweating, came out of the kitchen yelling about missing receipts. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Mara, you lost the credit slips again, didn't you? She froze mid-step, a tray of empty glasses in her hands. No, I put them in the drawer like always. Don't you lie to me. He barked. You think I don't know when someone's slacking? You've been careless for weeks. If you weren't so... He stopped only when Daniel stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Benny, Daniel said quietly, I think that's enough. Benny blinked, caught off guard. Sir, I'm just trying to keep order here. By humiliating your staff? Daniel's tone was sharp now, his patience thinning. That's not order. That's fear. The diner went silent. Mara stood frozen, unsure whether to move or speak. Daniel took a deep breath and turned toward her. Mara, can you show me the drawer where you keep the receipts? She nodded shakily and led him to the small cabinet behind the counter. She opened it and there they were, neatly stacked, right where she said they'd be. Benny's face went pale. Daniel turned back to him. You owe her an apology. Benny's jaw worked like he might argue, but under Daniel's gaze he looked away. Sorry, he muttered, barely audible. Daniel nodded once. You can do better than that, he said softly, and Benny's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Mara, he said again, louder this time. Mara felt her throat tighten. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. Not in this place. Not anywhere. She nodded slightly, whispering, It's okay, though her eyes burned. After the confrontation, Daniel called a short meeting in the corner booth. The staff gathered, still stunned by what they'd witnessed. I've seen what's wrong here, he said, folding his hands. The problem isn't the workers, it's the system. You're underpaid, overworked, and undervalued. That stops now. Benny's mouth opened in protest, but Daniel's calm stare silenced him. As of today, he continued, we're restructuring. Every employee here will receive a raise. Equipment will be upgraded, and this diner will become the model for what every location should be. The room filled with whispers, disbelief spreading like fire. Mara stood still, hardly able to breathe. Was this real? Her heart hammered as she watched him address the staff, His words not just promises but truths spoken with conviction. When the meeting ended, Daniel motioned for Mara to stay behind. The others filtered out, buzzing with relief and gratitude, but she remained frozen by the counter. He waited until the room was quiet before speaking. "You're the reason I came here," he said. "Yesterday, when that man insulted you, I saw something in you, strength, grace, even when everything around you was wrong." Mara blinked, tears threatening again. "I'm just doing my job," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you're doing much more than that. You're keeping this place alive." For the first time in a long while, she didn't look away. She met his gaze and felt something inside her, something fragile but real, begin to heal. Daniel smiled then, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "We're going to rebuild this place together." And as he walked out into the pale afternoon light, Mara stood at the window watching him go, her reflection trembling against the glass. For once the world didn't feel so cruel. For once she believed maybe she wasn't invisible after all. Mara woke the next morning before dawn, her heart already racing before her feet even hit the floor. For the first time in years, she wasn't dreading the day ahead. There was still exhaustion in her bones, yes, but beneath it something new stirred. Hope, faint and unfamiliar, like sunlight pushing through clouds after a long storm. She made breakfast for Lucy, who smiled sleepily as her mother hummed an old tune while packing her lunch. Lucy noticed it first. "You're happy today," she said through a mouthful of toast. Mara smiled softly. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe something good's finally coming." At the diner, the mood was different. The other waitresses, once hollow-eyed and resigned, were whispering about the changes Daniel had promised. Even the cook, a grizzled man named Ray who rarely spoke more than 2 words, was humming as he flipped pancakes. Benny, on the other hand, was quieter than usual, keeping to his office most of the morning. His pride had taken a hit, but Mara couldn't bring herself to feel sorry. For once, she didn't have to shrink under his shadow. Around 9, Daniel returned, dressed more casually this time, rolled-up sleeves, no tie. He greeted the staff with warmth, his presence calm but commanding. "Today's about rebuilding," he said. "Not just this diner, but how we treat each other inside it." He walked through the kitchen, making notes on everything that needed fixing. Broken equipment, peeling paint, unsafe wiring. Then he gathered the team around a booth and listened, to everyone. Their frustrations, their ideas, their small dreams of what could make their jobs better. When it was Mara's turn, her voice shook at first. "Sometimes," she said, "it's not the work that breaks you. It's how invisible you start to feel doing it." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's the part we're going to change first." The hours that followed felt like a movie playing in slow motion. New supplies were delivered. Repairs began on the ancient fryer that sparked every other day. Daniel even rolled up his sleeves and helped scrub the kitchen walls, laughing with the staff as grease stains fought back. Mara watched him from across the room, unsure how a man like him, someone from the top, could move among them so easily, as though he'd always belonged there. By afternoon, a local reporter arrived with a camera crew. Benny's grill, usually ignored by everyone except the regulars, suddenly buzzed with energy. The reporter asked Daniel what brought him here. He smiled faintly before answering. "Sometimes you don't find stories. They find you. I met someone here who reminded me why these places matter." His gaze flicked to Mara and the camera followed. She flushed and looked down, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. When the reporter asked for her thoughts, Mara hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked anything that mattered. Finally, she said softly, "It's nice to be seen." Her voice trembled, but it carried. The crew filmed the diner's transformation, the paint, the laughter, the sense of purpose growing where despair once lived. And as they worked late into the evening, the place began to change. It wasn't just the new booths or polished counters, it was the people. The diner breathed again. After closing, Daniel and Mara sat at the counter, the lights dimmed and the scent of fresh paint lingering in the air. He stirred his coffee slowly, then turned to her. "I used to work in a place like this," he said quietly. "Long before I ever became a CEO, my mother was a waitress. She raised 3 of us on tips and double shifts. I remember watching her come home every night, too tired to eat but still smiling for us." He paused, his eyes distant. "I saw that same strength in you." Mara swallowed hard, her throat tight. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. Daniel looked at her, his expression soft but steady. I did. People forget where they came from. I can't. Silence settled between them, gentle and warm. Outside, the rain began again, tapping against the glass. Mara thought of how far she'd fallen and how far she might yet rise. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel broken. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he extended his hand. Tomorrow we reopen. New menu, new start. I'd like you to manage the floor, she blinked. Manage? He smiled. You've already been doing it just without the title or the pay. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, tears slipped down her cheeks. Quiet, grateful tears that caught the diner's light like tiny stars. She nodded, unable to speak, and Daniel just smiled before heading for the door. As the bell above it jingled softly behind him, Mara stood in the quiet diner, breathing in the scent of fresh beginnings. Her hands trembled, but not from fear this time. From awe. Tomorrow, the same people who once ignored her would walk through these doors and see something new. Not just a brighter diner, but a woman who refused to stay invisible, and for the first time, Mara believed she was finally becoming who she was meant to be. She reached into her apron pocket and unfolded the napkin, the same one that started it all. The ink had faded, but the words still burned bright. You deserve better than this. Don't lose faith in yourself. She placed it on the counter like a relic, her heart whispering a silent thank you, to the stranger who saw her, to the pain that taught her strength, and to the woman she'd become. Outside, the night wind stirred, carrying the faint sound of laughter and clinking dishes from nearby streets. The world kept moving, unaware of the quiet miracle that had unfolded inside a small-town diner. Mara smiled to herself, closing her eyes. Sometimes the greatest rescue doesn't come from money or power. It comes from being seen, from one act of grace that reminds a broken soul they still matter. And as she turned off the diner lights, leaving only the warm glow of the neon sign behind her, she whispered into the stillness, "Thank you for seeing me." The sign flickered once, steady and bright, as though the world itself was answering back. Mara's story reminds us that sometimes a single act of kindness can rewrite an entire life. It's not always about saving the world, it's about saving someone's world. About seeing the people we overlook, the quiet souls carrying pain behind tired smiles. How many Maras do we walk past every day? How many chances do we get to notice them before it's too late? If you saw someone like her tomorrow, would you stop? Would you help? Because maybe, just maybe, the difference between despair and hope is someone who finally says, you deserve better than this. If this story moved you, share it, talk about it, or think about who you can see today. Because sometimes all it takes to change a life is to care.